Modular Water Systems were amazing in understanding the need of the client from a decentralized water product, regardless of the location, the conditions, and the parameters that were needed. We had a EPA designated effluent that made sure that we were getting what they would call Class A wastewater effluent that we could then otherwise turn around and use in gray water systems, both interior and exterior applications, which was amazing. And what was great about Modular was, just as the name implies, whether we were in Thailand or we were in Djibouti, in Mauritania, the delivery and the design were both simple yet sophisticated. To be able to take a pre-engineered, prefabricated solution that could handle anywhere from 2,000 gallons per day up to 50,000 gallons per day, and to be able to say that that design is scalable and allow for that natural growth without having to completely upend your infrastructure as that growth occurs. That future-proofing of these decentralized plants is going to be critical for what is going to happen in 5 and 10 years. It's been a great ride so far and cannot wait to continue the relationship with Dan and Modular Water.
Welcome aboard, everyone. Water the Blue Gold, Thursday, September 21, briefing number 229. And I want to thank AJ, our marketing czar, for helping me through this is a very complex, what you're seeing right now is a result of some very complex work to upgrade our presentation. Excellent to see you all here. And we're going to keep on rocking. Of course, the usual disclaimers. All right, now, as I promised earlier today to talk to you about wildfires and floods, and do you know that Lahaina, Maui was known as the Venice of the Pacific? That's pretty wild, isn't it? Here's a article from The Guardian that how 19th century pineapple plantations turned Maui into a tinderbox. And so at one time, when in the 18th century, when Hawaii was its own state, there was so much water that it was called the Venice of the Pacific. Natural wetlands that nourished breadfruit trees, extensive taro terraces, and fish ponds. One of those particular fish ponds became a baseball diamond in the modern Lahaina. But it's not, the baseball diamond is not what happened. What happened was we drove Lahaina into, from streams and biodiverse food forests into really monocultures. And that's what led to this horrendous blaze, of course. And there's a tremendous amount of rain in Hawaii, and it really should not be an issue. But a pound of sugar requires 2,000 pounds of fresh water to produce. So that's pretty intense. And we also have a lot of invasive plants that cover a lot of Hawaii and poisoned water wells. Not a good picture. Now, there was, as I covered last week, there was a law. Well, first of all, let me just cover this, is that early on there was the ability to have private land ownership, and that led to the overthrow of the Queen of Hawaii, and developers took control of century-old irrigation ditches and diverted water to service its luxury subdivisions. And unfortunately, it left scraps. And that was that video last week by that activist who was talking about what happened. Again here, tremendous amount of usage. Grand Wailea Resort alone devours enough for 1,400 homes just by itself. Now, again, in itself, that should not be a problem. But we have a stewardship issue because, sure enough, there was the ability to give special designation to the Lahaina aquifer sector, and I'm reading right here, and so it unfortunately was blown up by the fires. All right, so obviously here's a sugar mill, and we need to resurrect the wetlands and ecosystems. And by the way, this happened in New Orleans as well, where the smart thing to do would have been to restore the wetlands of the Mississippi River instead of rebuilding behind the levees, but that didn't happen. So water is just one piece of the pie. Stream restoration needs to be coupled with Native Hawaiians having access to those lands so they can rebuild the food forest that once was. All right, so what lesson can we get from that? Well, in my opinion, this is about central management of water leads to degradation of water infrastructure, but also to abuses by very wealthy private ownership. And we saw that, for example, in California with Nestle taking a tremendous amount of water for its water bottling. You know, it doesn't have to bottle in a desert land. It can bottle somewhere else. So you have a problem. You have distortions by very large central. When you have a central system, it can be bent or influenced by local wealthy interests. And I think if we're going to get anywhere with Lahaina, it would make sense to decentralize and create self-reliance. Now, let's talk about the Libyan floods. And that was another problem, Africa's deadliest flood disaster. And you've heard about this. And basically, what happened was you're looking at a devastation. All of that was green at one time. It's horrendous. I don't have to tell you all about it, but tremendous amount, a dam burst, then a second dam, and it all kind of went into the sea. There's a sketch of what happened. Here's the issue: aging and crumbling infrastructure, inadequate warnings because of the fact that Libya itself is a failed state today. And then on top of it, it's believed that warming ocean waters are leading to much more winds. That's what happened in Lahaina as well, with the 80-mile-per-hour winds coming in. And this was known as a Medicane, a Mediterranean hurricane over the Mediterranean. And it strengthened, and there we go. Now, no maintenance in 21 years. Problems were known. Here's a university paper that had a high potential for flood risk, needed maintenance, and of course, it did not happen. And it warned quite a bit about this, but of course, the problem is that the city's infrastructure has crumbled and is woefully inadequate in the face of floods. So, again, you know, what do we do here? We've got to continue the process that we have begun here, which is of creating independent water independence. And obviously, we're not going to be able to help Libya shortly. So this is really more just an illustration of the issue, right? And how it could be done better. Berkey water filters are wonderful filters. They, I mean, it's amazing. Unfortunately, they've basically been shut down. Why? Because the EPA has designated their technology as a pesticide for some strange reason. They use these black carbon filters. And it's basically pure carbon. I don't know why they would call it pesticide, but it's been shown that they remove, it's one of the few systems that can remove the forever chemicals, PFAS. Here's the press release. But the bottom line is that this is one of the very finest. These big Berkey systems remove radioactive cesium, and yet these are being shut down. So what can I say? This is a sad situation. There's not much that they're just going to have to work their way through it. But it seems to me it's bureaucracy run rampant. Again, this is why businesses want to be independent of the central water systems, because of the arbitrary things that municipalities, utilities do. And it's like, look, we'll just take care of our own water, we'll meet the regulations, and we'll recharge the aquifer, you know, ourselves, and that's it. You don't have to worry about us. I'm going to go ahead and play a podcast with the Carl Gould Collective. So let's take it away.
Hi, everyone. This is Carl Gould with another episode of the Carl Gould Collective, where we bring you the top CEO minds and subject matter experts to help you accelerate your learning curve and grow your businesses. Today, we're really lucky. We have Riggs Eckelberry, He's the founder and CEO of the innovative water technology company OriginClear, and he's disrupting the industry and delivering water solutions for industrial customers worldwide. So welcome to the show, Riggs.
Carl, it's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So there's a lot of places to start in your career, but there's no, I don't think, natural jump to water. So take me through a little bit of what got you to the place where you said, I want to disrupt and I want to improve and innovate the water industry.
So we're not starting where I was an 8-pound baby.
No, don't need that one. I'm sure you're 8 pounds. And then let me guess, right after that, you were 9, right? And then take us through 10 pounds, right?
Right.
So let's jump right into it. And your resume will unfold, I'm sure, as we go.
Well, thank you. My jump into water was an odd and strange one because I was a tech guy. In the 80s, I had a tech company in New York City. By the way, a major learning experience where I learned so many lessons that have, one of the many. But then in the 90s, of course, the .com was amazing. I loved it, had some good exits. And then in the early 2000s, I was helping a company go onto the NASDAQ, software company in the security space. And I was the number 2, doing the road shows in New York City, all that good stuff. And I just felt that, what number 2 doesn't think there can be a better number 1? I reached out to a fund that I knew, and I said, I think I can be a CEO. And they said, yeah, actually, but we're not doing tech anymore. That's passé. And it's ironic because literally tech had its biggest jump after that with Facebook and so forth. But nonetheless, they had decided to go green. And they said, what we want to do is algae for biofuels. And so I'm like, right. Okay. And weirdly enough, I have a brother, super inventor brother. He's very sort of the back to the future kind of guy. And he had a patent that could be used to grow algae. Anyway, long story short, we started a company. It was called Origin Oil because algae was the original oil. And it was a great run. I mean, I had all this media attention because who knew? It's kind of wild. And it was very much in vogue at the time. And crude oil was at $120 a barrel. So it was doable. Then along came fracking. And all of a sudden, within a couple of years, algae became a science experiment because crude was below $50. And as a result, we had to do something. And I've learned in the 80s, I kind of gave up and gave away my company to my top salesman. I was done with giving up. And so basically it's easier to pivot than to give up. So that's what we did. And we found an application of our algae extraction technology to extract sewage from water. And boom, we were in the water industry. And immediately we became completely invisible to the media. Boom. Because water is taken for granted. It's like a road. You only notice it when there's a pothole. Otherwise, it's a road. What's the big deal? Yeah. But the problem is there's a tremendous amount of potholes in the water industry. We have a big problem with the infrastructure, not because the people aren't great, but they're totally underfunded by about $100 billion.
What are the problems? What are our infrastructure problems with water?
Well, it's very simple. We had a infrastructure boom. The Hoover Dam, the New York's Delaware water system, all kinds of aqueducts, everything was built in the first part of the 20th century. And then it petered out. And I think, again, because politicians respond to what the voters care about, and voters took water for granted. And the funding for water went downhill from there. And it also became harder and harder to build centralized systems in populated. I mean, Pinellas County is one of the most built up counties in Florida. Where are you going to put a sewage plant, and who would agree to it? And it takes 20 years. So it became impossible to really think of. It's like, are you going to build another Hoover Dam? Not going to happen. It was okay back then because people would die almost every single day. They'd fall into the cofferdam and then they'd keep pouring the concrete. I don't think we do that anymore. So the era of big central works fell behind, but what replaces it? And so when we got into it at first, we were just pure technology. We had a technology solution, and what we ran into was a technology. Water industry is technology phobic because, again, what they do is fine. They're kind of trying to hold it still and not change anything. Sometimes for good reasons like public health, but nonetheless, it's very, very static technology-wise. And in 2016, soon after we purchased our Texas company, which is doing fantastically, I came across a piece of research from Lux Research that basically said decentralized water is the thing. Unburden the system. The system is not being funded. It's not going to be funded anytime soon. I mean, do you realize that the Biden $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, the water portion of it was 1/2000th of it?
No kidding.
Nothing. It was $55 billion. So
is essentially what you're saying is we're not going to see any big Hoover dams. There's not going to be any more Lake Meads happening, so by decentralization, what does that entail?
Okay, the first thing to realize is what overburdens our infrastructure is the fact that 90% of water demand is by industry and agriculture. Only 10% is residential.
I've read that the cows use more water than people in America. 100%,
much more, because agriculture and industry in America is about 50-50 of that 90%. Now, if you go to Somalia, it's 90% agriculture, but in America, it's about half-half. And so it's about 4 times as much as people, therefore, and there's no easy fix. But what does make sense is if you have an overburn, if there's too many people riding a horse, get the second person off the horse, right?
Right.
That's the easy thing. You don't get a stronger horse. So that's the easy thing is like get off the horse. And so we got into the business of getting industry and agriculture off of the grid. And it turns out it's beneficial. They like it. Here's why. Because of all these problems with infrastructure, they are being harassed by the municipalities. We can't take your water, truck it to another county, blah, blah, blah. And water rates skyrocketing. You've seen the graphs recently. What's the highest inflating things in America? There's 2 things, hospital services and college tuition, right?
Right.
Water is inflating as fast as college tuition.
No kidding.
But it's not on the graphs. It's not showing up. Again, I don't know why, but
no one's talking about it necessarily. Yeah.
There's real pain. And people are defaulting on their water bills. And now you got to go get bottled water. That's even worse, right? And the utilities can't charge enough, but they're still trying. So businesses get, okay, you know what? If I go off the grid, have my own system, then I'll control my costs. I'll be able to recycle, which I'm not doing right now. And that way I'll get more turns out of the water I'm paying for. And I'll have less hassle from the central government. It's a win-win. And the municipalities are like, great. They're happy. They're not fighting it like the energy companies are fighting solar, right? So they're like, okay, love it. Go for it. Do your thing. And so we have a boom, both at the very high level. For example, PepsiCo recently committed to 80% recycling of their water. Well, to do that, you have to treat your own processed water. You can't send it to the city. So at the high end, it's happening big time. But also where the big revolution, I believe, is in the small to middle, which is far more numerous. And, breweries, housing developments, car dealerships, freeway rest stops, RV campgrounds, mobile home parks, you name it. Anybody who has to go off the grid is doing it. And so what we dealt with in the recent years and right now is the people who have to, they're forced to. They're in the middle of nowhere, they got to connect. For example, we're experiencing in northern Texas a land boom between Dallas and the Oklahoma border. It's racing ahead of sewage capabilities. So we're installing these cool drop-in-place containers. It's literally like one of those self-storage containers you see on it's people's driveways. That's it. Boop, dropped in, it's done, and it processes the water.
So that's like a portable sewage system?
Exactly. Containerized, modular.
When it processes it, does it become potable water or is it non-potable water?
Well, whatever you want. Typically, it gets more and more expensive the more potable it gets. So typically it goes to a level of what's called gray water, where you can use it for irrigation. You can recharge the aquifer, except in really, really, really water-stressed areas. You don't need the potable water. It's too expensive. So typically it's for reuse in non-potable areas, which is plenty. A brewery can reuse 50% of its water for non-potable purposes. So that's plenty because it takes 7 to 8 liters of water to make a liter of beer. Well, now you just cut that in half. Well, actually by about 25% if you do the math. Well, that's a couple of liters, and that helps. And they do it more than once, and that kind of stuff. So it's beneficial. They like it. Everybody's in favor of it. But now we're looking ahead to not the people who are forced to. That's our current. We're doubling or tripling our business every year. It's going great. But those are the people that have to. The next phase is going to be people who decide to do it strategically. They don't have to do it, but they decide to do it. For them, the big barrier is capital. Who has a budget? You're a brewery. Do you have $1 million set aside for your water treatment system? No, it's not your business. So during the pandemic is when we really started getting creative about this. It was in February of 2020 when nobody really knew what was going to happen next, but we knew there was a big deal. When Wuhan shut down for a month, we knew there's a big deal coming, and we figured capital was going to be an issue. Now, we didn't realize that $14 trillion was going to be floated out there, but still, even to this day, people need help with capital. And so we decided to do something called water on demand, which is water as a service. You want water treatment? Sign here, 15-year service contract. The machine that goes on site, that container, is ours. We maintain it. You pay on the meter like you're used to with the city. There's no change of paradigm, and it's seamless.
You're still paying a water and a sewer bill.
Exactly. So everybody's happy, and that is the new trend. So first part was the two challenges. The first challenge was shrinking the water systems from these big, hole in the ground type systems that people are accustomed to that container or even that 200 square foot unit in the corner of the brewery, whatever. So shrinking it down, and we built a company called Modular Water Systems, which is kicking it. And then we got into this modular water, and the model there is to approximate the oil well model, which is master limited partnerships, which generate royalties. And now regular investors can invest in water systems for the first time in a basket of water systems. And that has not been available until now. People love it. They're excited about it. And it's we call it water like an oil well. And it's cool because you make a lot of money from oil wells, but it's oil. How about water? Isn't that cool? People get excited.
Yeah, very cool. And this, it sounds like this targets the commercial, agricultural, industrial market. You're not necessarily looking to put one of these treatment systems in someone's backyard, because it doesn't sound like residential is the real issue here.
Yeah. First of all, we don't go after the 10%. You want to go for the 90%. That's
sure, of course.
Entrepreneurial rule. Go for the big. What the asked Jesse James, where why do you rob banks? It's where the money is. Well, why do we help industry and agriculture? It's where the demand is, right? But secondly, it's very cutthroat. It's very commoditized. There's players in the space already. Fuji Water has a great black water system for homes. I bet they sell 12 a year. Because who recycles black water? I mean, most people use a septic tank or just send it to the city. So we stay away from that. But there's a future in it. Look at just one last thing, and then I want to talk a little bit more about what interests you in terms of your podcast. But Miami-Dade County, when they first built it, they had no city planning, and they ended up with 100,000 septic tanks within the county limits. And those are now polluting all the aquifer, which is only 2 feet below the freaking septic tank. So, So their solution is, we're going to send a sewage line to each one of those 100,000 places. Oh, that's going to cost $8, $10, $12 billion, 20 years, tear up all the streets. Why not just give a rebate to all these places to convert to a black water system? And that's a solution. We're not pitching Miami-Dade, because one of our big cardinal rules is don't talk to government except to get permits. Otherwise, industry self-help, agriculture self-help.
Right, sure. So that leads me to where I was going to go. What are some of the challenges you have found in, bringing this innovation to the water industry? Because usually, when you disrupt an industry, you're usually disrupting the 800-pound gorilla in every industry. So what challenges have you faced?
This is a very good point. I've been giving a lot of thought to disruption. In fact, I'm planning to start a podcast, Creative Disruption, because I'm so passionate about it. Mark Andreessen recently on Joe Rogan said something very interesting, or was it Matt Taibbi? One of them, he said, Substack cracked the code for writer publishing, right? Crack the code. Now that's a key term, because now That's what you have to do when you want to disrupt. Now, what did we do to crack the code? The first thing was realize what you're doing already is not functioning. That's the first step. So it takes a certain amount of humility to go, what I'm doing. And we spent tons of money and time on this technology approach, only to learn that the water industry takes 12 to 15 years to adopt a new technology. And we just didn't have that kind of time. Then I was inspired by that Lux Research webinar, 2016. I was like a man in the wilderness, decentralized water. And people are like, oh, what?
Right, yeah.
In 2018 is when we cracked the code, because we hired Dan Early, who'd been doing this in the wilderness for 20 years already. He was a decentralized water guru who'd been doing these nonstop, unheralded, just kind of doing it, plugging away. And he had terrible capital problems, which is why we were able to acquire him. We built this whole division around him, Modular Water. And we said, okay, this is it. This is our chance. And his philosophy of mass assembly, of modular containers, super durable materials, everything in a box, and completely turnkey delivered, so that a regular non-water expert can maintain it on site. Because decentralized water, you don't want to have a water expert, right? So all these things. Then it took years to grow it, and it finally took off in 2022. It was double of 2021, and now it's double again this year. It's doubling each year. So that when you start doubling each year, that's the lily pond effect. Like whoop, whoop, whoop. That's really cool. So, and we do believe there's limits to it, which is why we're coming with that capital solution, but he's expanding. So to go back on the process, A, recognition, B, inspiration, and then the resource, to crack the code, to get traction. You got to get traction somehow. And that always involves either technology or expertise. Let's imagine you're doing an Amazon business. Well, you'd better really, really get to know the Amazon business cold, right? Because it's super, super competitive and cluttered. And water is the same way. I mean, there's some big players. We have now elbowed our way into the space, and we're differentiated by being a decentralization pure play, which most other people are not. And secondly, welcoming regular investors, which no one else is doing. That is Carl Gould. Now, I'm not sure that I want to do another. These podcasts have been actually, running along, and there's a wonderful RJ Ahmed interviewed me last week, and this is that particular podcast. But, I think I'd rather segue over into Ken is ready. I'm going to just ask him to jump in and join me. But here's Ken himself. Hey, Ken.
It's working. Well, kind of.
Yeah, you're looking good. You're looking good. All right. So I guess what's going on in the world right now is that there's going to be a lot more disasters for a variety of reasons, but people tend to neglect the one of simply underinvestment in infrastructure. Yes, climate change issues. Yes, drought, water, overuse of facilities, you name it. But the main thing is that we have put our trust in central managers, and those central managers are perfectly good, except they're not funded. And so we have to have a radical rethinking, and that's what this decentralized, self-reliant water treatment is all about.
We're throwing a 20th century solution at a 21st century problem, right? I mean, isn't that what it comes down to?
You might even say 19th century, really, in a way.
Okay, yeah, it's even worse. 19th century solution at a 21st century problem. So the population of the world has expanded. Even that huddled around the city locations, even that is, kind of exploded out. And it just what worked in 1920s and 40s just doesn't work anymore. So being able to co-locate these things has, it's always made sense. But just now that the technology exists to do this.
That's a really good point, Ken, because it always made sense, but as a concept, but it didn't make sense technologically. It was very hard to create compact systems. That 2016 research paper, a webinar by Lux Research, emphasized the problem with downsizing and creating both small systems and remote management. Without the internet, how are you going to do it? So I think that it's yes, I think the pent up demand was always there, but it's kind of like what they say is that they've invented 50% of the anti-gravity chair. Well, they invented the chair, right? So the anti-gravity part's the hard part, and so.
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, if you read that report, it says this is the solution. Someone should do it,
right?
Like it was like this is the solution. Someone should do it. Kind of like, and here Dan had been kind of out there, and he was just kind of he was on the cusp of something great at a time when it wasn't fully understood, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when it became elementary that this was the solution, and things like blockchain and something as whatever as a service, cloud-based modalities and capabilities came to be. All of a sudden, it became like, well, of course, this is how you do it. But it took Dan's genius a decade early, right, to develop these and to scale down these plants where they could be used for that bulge bracket, which is not the giant users. They'll never be the problem. It's everyone else that is, and we're ideally suited to be there at the right time. So it's a good time to be us.
Right on. Okay, so with that, I want to just mention that we have Ken Berenger has the full investing options, and there have been developments. If you know, but you may not have heard about the developments. They're extremely positive. We cannot get into them here, but Ken can certainly brief you. And the other thing is, Timothy Melton says, "Hey Ken, well, we're interested in knowing what you're saying beyond Hey Ken." And also I got corrected on who said, because that's where the money is. It was actually Willie Sutton, not Jesse James, a notorious American bank robber. Thank Jonathan Gifford for correcting that. But nonetheless, that's where it's at.
That's been attributed to everybody.
Exactly.
Exactly.
The other thing I wanted to do was to invite everyone to please fill out your Zoom survey. It'll pop up. It helps us, gives us good information. So please do that. AJ, are you still with us?
Of course.
AJ, I wanted to just circle back with you because you're working on a few projects that it's important for us to tell people about. And I think this should be the focus of your conversation in these briefings, which is what's happening with marketing. We're working on, for example, we've wrapped up the extensive Modular Water Systems competitive analysis, which is incredibly valuable. And we'll be publishing the final version of that. But then you're working also on a website for Modular Water Systems.
Yes, so we've got a website redesign going in. We actually met with two different design firms to kind of help make a world-class website for us. We finally got our second proposal back, so I'll be scheduling a meeting with you, Riggs, to review those. But they both look really, really good. And I don't think any way we go is going to be bad. I know that Dan is going to be certainly happy that we get that project rolling again now that we've got those in. But it's exciting. One of the things that we talked about in those discussions, and I can't remember if it was shown in the clip that you had a couple of weeks ago of our session, but there's a theme where if you look at the Modular Water Systems website today, it's got a lot of technical drawings, a lot of 3D modeling and things like that. And what it doesn't do is highlight the progress where we've come so far in the past couple of years. You were talking to that podcast about, more and more installations doubling in growth every year for the past couple of years. That leads to a lot of installations. That leads to a lot of the kind of theory or the vision turning into reality. And that's really the direction forward for these websites, not just Modular Water, but for OriginClear and Water on Demand and all of these entities, is really showing how far we've come in the past few years to take these things from vision to reality. And so if that's something that gets me really excited to see is just how much we can replace of those images of the copy of the text with all of the testimonials that we have now, with all of the installation images and footage and all those things that show the real tangible work that's being done and the impact being made by our products. in these spaces and for our customers, and it's huge. And it's nice to be able to showcase that stuff. And I can't wait to get these things out so you guys can see more of it. It's wonderful stuff.
And AJ, we went over today. We had those videos produced. The genuinely blown away, totally impressed testimonials by, seasoned engineers, guys that have, these are not people that are, kind of easily impressed by kind of run of the mill, yeah, it's good. It's okay. Right. They, in other words, this is like, they see these systems all day, every day. So to be this impressed, to be this enamored with the way we've done this, I think very few people get very excited when they see this is no longer, look, there were aspirations in the beginning. This is now full blown execution. This is well into the cars are on the track and running, right? And I think being able to share with the public these sentiments from seasoned, really experienced, really brilliant engineers who in their own right are brilliant, and they think that this stuff is genius. I don't think that we can do it. We can sit here on a camera and talk about it, right? But I don't think that does it justice. I think you have to hear the words from the man or the woman, and to see his genuine enthusiasm, being a seasoned engineer, to really grasp just how special what we're doing is, and how far we've come in doing it.
Yes, and there's something very exciting that's going on, the initiative with the real-time testimonials. And so we're implementing that, of course, on your side, but also with Dan, so that when somebody goes, wow, that was incredible, he hits a button and out it goes, and it is a live testimonial, is the shot on the spot. Because there's so much of it happening, it's almost like a best-kept secret. And that's where we got to get these real-time reviews happening on the modular site.
Right. When you have to change your presentation about every 48 hours because something's happening, things are happening so quickly, right? It's like by the time you've kind of laid out what's happened this week, it's like, oh boy, I gotta kind of start from scratch. That's exciting. It's exhausting, but it's certainly exciting. That's how I would categorize the phase that we're in right now, the very exciting, fast moving phase.
Yes. And on a final note, there are going to be some press releases next week that I think will be very intriguing. I will say no more about that. But there's going to be some, there's been a lot of holding our breath, and now we're able to. So we're going to be having some good announcements next week, and then I'll be able to comment on them next Thursday night. So please join us for that. And just remember that you want to talk to Ken right here. You know how to get a hold of him, but basically oc.gold/Ken, go straight into the scheduling mode. And I wanted to thank everyone for jumping in and joining us. We're just loving what's going on. We think we have caught the wave perfectly for what is happening in the world today, and we really thank you for all of your support. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. I think we're set. And next week,
I've got one point, if we could. I don't mean to pull an audible here, but Ken, can you just give people a little bit of an understanding of what that meeting entails with you? Because we talk about, hey, have a meeting with Ken, and I understand, that there's a certain focus that goes along with that. But okay. I feel like we are given a little too much sizzle, not enough steak. Let's give them a tease. What kind of information do we expect to get from our meeting? Right.
So what I do is, as kind of the co-brainchild behind this entire thing, I'm in meetings with every aspect of the company on every battlefront that we are currently engaged in, and it's a quickly moving thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the individual, the prospective investor, and I'm actually going to, first of all, I'm going to provide a high view, which I think we cover very well here, right? But I'll provide some granularity to the high view that allows a person to completely say, okay, I got it. Now I know what it is, right? And they're able to ask questions in real time. Then I kind of take them to what we're going to be doing over the next 12 to 24 months. And again, that's kind of lower level, maybe 5,000 feet instead of 30. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screens with you. And I'm actually going to take you into the strategy of what we're going to be executing on and actually provide you timetables. So it's a very keen look at what we're doing, when we're doing, how we're doing it. And then, of course, you can arrive at your own conclusion as to where that puts you and where it puts us as a company. But universally, I find that the folks that I speak to go, wow, you jammed a lot into a 40-minute conversation. I've done this a couple of times. So fortunately now I've learned to trim the extraneous parts, and we get right down to the meat of it. So it really is, it's a very distilled view at what we do. And I kind of cover each layer, and the final layer really allows the participant to fully grasp both the short and long term. And, I'm thank God I've done it 8,000 times. So I've gotten kind of efficient at it.
Amen. Yes, you certainly have. Wow, this just in. The median American household needed 44% of its income to cover payments on a median price home as of July. Oh, Lord. Whew. Not a good thing. But I'm not going to get into real estate. That is something I cover occasionally, but it's not really the focus here. Kevin says, what do we got here? Okay. This is Dan McCoy. He recommends somebody telling a story. Absolutely. I'm also working with my good friend Ted McGrath, who's a master of story and messaging. I've actually retained him personally. This is not this is my expense, not the company's, because I agree that story is of the greatest importance, story and message. So we'll be working on that. Thank you very much, Kevin, for the suggestion. And we are, great minds think alike. So with that, is anyone else going to pull an audible on me, or can I wrap this up?
No, I think that was a touchdown. I think we're good to go. Game over.
Next week, we will have you on screen, my friend. And I think a report from marketing each week is going to be very, very useful. So let's make that an institution.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Right on. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. And be well. And we love your support. Thank you. Remember, we will be commenting next week on some major developments that we expect. So be sure to show up. Thank you so much, and be well.
Good night.
Good night.